The agenda is approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
So moved and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Oh, nay, anybody? Motion passes. Anybody here from the public like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Seeing none. Special reports and presentations. So first one, I'll just read this from my seat. The lady could not be here. Is a proclamation for Human Trafficking and Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Baldwin City, Kansas. Whereas human trafficking and modern form of slavery is one of the largest and fastest growing criminal industries in the world, it is based on recruiting, harboring, and transporting people for the purpose of exploitation. And whereas millions of men, women, children around the globe, including here in Baldwin City, Kansas, are subject to modern day slavery, the cruel and inhumane practice of human trafficking. And whereas sex trafficking and harbor trafficking occur in Kansas, and both adults and children of any gender, socioeconomic status, age, race, sexual orientation, or geographic location can be victimized. And whereas human trafficking includes sexual, verbal, emotional, and physical abuse and exploitation, and all forms of abuse carry long-term complex trauma implications. And whereas Kansas human trafficking laws define commercial exploitation of children, which does not require a showing of force, fraud, threat, or coercion, and references the existing statutory definition of human trafficking and aggravated human trafficking. And whereas the effects of human trafficking reach far beyond its victims and perpetrators, causing disruption in our schools, places of work, and neighborhoods, and now therefore Baldwin City, Kansas proclaims the month of January 2024 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and urges all its citizens to speak out against sex and labor trafficking and exploitation, to support survivors of these heinous crimes, to encourage community leaders to hold offenders accountable, and to make preventable efforts a priority by hosting events, creating policies at work, school, and home, and by supporting and participating in programs designed to reduce and eventually eliminate human trafficking as a societal problem. That was our first presentation. Next, we have the Historic District presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Stan Hernley, Hernley Associates. Also with me this evening is Megan Brewy from Hernley Associates and Joni Hernley from Hernley Associates. We're working on the National Register Historic District for downtown Baldwin City. Have a short little presentation. So just a little update of where we stand on the project and be able to answer questions that you may have. Okay, so let's go ahead. We've talked about this project a little bit before. When we worked on the Downtown Historic Survey, the recommendations from that survey had outlined a potential boundary for a historic district. As we got started on this project and talked more with the Kansas Historical Society staff, their recommendation was to go ahead with a more simple boundary, basically Grove Street on the north, 6th Street on the east, 9th Street on the west, and the alley south of High Street. Essentially, that's the original survey area of that we worked on a year ago. Looking at all of the property or buildings and resources in that area, there's about 54 resources, and approximately 32 will potentially be eligible for contributing historic structures in the historic district. Let's go ahead and go to the next page. So this is a little closer view of the survey area. Also, in discussing with the Historical Society staff The brick streets will be a contributing resource in the historic district. And this map starts to highlight some of the buildings that we're pretty sure are contributing and non-contributing. And some of those discussions are still ongoing with Historical Society staff as we get more research and information put together. Okay, let's go ahead. Just to give you an idea of, if you haven't looked at a historic nomination before, it's made up of basically two parts. There's a narrative description of, in this case, the historic district. It'll describe each of the buildings, each of the resources that are in the district. And then the second part is a narrative statement of significance, basically talking about the historical background and why the district is an important historic feature. So let's go ahead. We've talked a little bit in the past about what some of the benefits are. One of the big benefits are the potential for contributing structures in the district to be able to apply for historic grants, and then also to be able to use state and federal income tax credits when rehabilitation is proposed for a building. Okay, let's go ahead. A few of, so some of the buildings will be non-contributing. One of those will be the original library, which is a part of the City Hall complex now. There were some updates done to the facade of that building that changed the character of it. And so it'll be features like that that have altered a building to a point where the historic character has been affected. Some of those buildings could be rehabilitated and become contributing. So just because it's a building isn't contributing right now doesn't mean it's not contributing for its entire life. So if someone had a building that wasn't contributing and the reason was maybe the storefront had been changed, a project to reestablish a storefront similar to the original could bring it back into being a contributing structure and then eligible for tax credits. Okay. I keep talking about the tax credits. The tax credits from the state historic rehabilitation program for communities with less than 9,500 population is 40% of the project cost. Federal rehabilitation tax credits are 20%. So if you have a commercial building in downtown, rehabilitate it, and it's eligible, it could earn up to 60% of what you spend back in tax credits. The state tax credits can be transferred or sold basically for about 90% of their value. The federal credits are used by the owners of the property. Okay. And one thing to know about the state tax credits, and I think this is important for the city in particular, when you start thinking about work on City Hall or the power station, projects that cost more than $5,000 are eligible to go through the tax credit program. So if you were going to update the bathrooms in City Hall or anything that's more than, replace the furnace, and it's more than $5,000, you can run it through the state tax credit program and earn tax credits back. And as the city, you can sell those and earn some of the money back. Okay. Again, the federal tax credits are 20%. So someone that has a commercial building downtown, for the federal tax credits, it has to be eligible, it has to be a substantial rehabilitation. So it would need to be you'd have to be spending as much as the value of the building to be eligible for federal. So that's for larger projects. Okay? So there's the 60% total. Okay, let's go ahead. And then we're back to the map. So one of the things about the map, inside of the boundary, we have, the commercial buildings on High Street and 8th Street, but we also have the Methodist Church up on the north side in the middle, and in the northeast corner, 2 buildings that are Baker University structures and the tennis courts. And then on the west edge, there are some residences that are within the district boundary as well. So schedule-wise, we're on track we've got a good start on the writing of the nomination. The plan is early March to get a draft submitted to the state, and they'll start reviewing it. They'll provide responses and recommendations of revisions, and we'll make those, and then it'll get put onto schedule to be heard by the Historic Sites Review Board. Earliest for that will probably be August, would be my guess on that. So.
What's a yellow one? I know what the red and purple one is.
The yellow are buildings that we're not 100% sure yet. We still need whether we think they're contributing or not. They have some features that might kick them out, but we need to talk with the state more about those. Is that correct, Megan? Yes, thank you.
Questions for Stan?
Okay, this is a good step for Baldwin City. Really excited about it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Community survey presentation.
All right, it's good to see some familiar faces. Thank you, Mayor, for having me. Thank you, members of the council. I don't know the 3 of you over here, but I'm Ryan Murray. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Research with ETC. I've had the pleasure of working with this group, as well as staff, Glenn and Len, to kind of produce and publish our presentation this evening. I've got a copy of the full report with me. So if there are any tough questions for which I don't know off the top of my head, I can reference the report. Anything beyond that, I'll go back to writing and make sure to get Len and Glenn a written response and get that to you as soon as possible. One of the other things that I wanted to do before we got into this was just mention as a part of our contract, there's also an employee survey. So we'll begin discussions with that after we kind of close this out and get any additional data requests or analysis requests kind of out of the way. And then we'll begin working on that with staff. So this is my intro slide. If we go to our next slide, it'll be about our firm. I've already introduced myself. But our firm is ETC Institute. We're based just in Olathe, Kansas, about 25-30 minutes away from here. We've been in business about 40 years, but for about the past 35 years or so, our focus has really been municipal governance. We also work with state DOTs, county governments, both throughout our state as well as throughout the country, as you can see on the board there. When we go to our next slide, we'll see the purpose of the survey. And so it's really important to kind of contextualize all these results. And we'll see some benchmarking later on that will further help contextualize the actual ratings that you'll see in the report. But it's really important to understand the purpose of this entire process. So it's not a nitpicking, it's not an assessment on how people think. It's really an assessment on how people feel, view, and perceive the delivery of city services. As a part of this process, though, it's really going to help inform and continue to push on your strategic planning. So it's a really good way to gauge the public, determine where you're maybe excelling or exceeding expectations, determine where we could maybe use some assistance based on our important satisfaction analysis, and get a really good idea of how folks generally think and feel about the community at a really high level. When we talk about the important satisfaction analysis later on, I want you to understand that regardless of the way that the survey results would have come out, even if 100% of respondents were satisfied with each and every one of the rating items on the survey, we still would have developed priorities for improvement, and that's just kind of the inherent design of the survey. So that's kind of important to understand and frame up the purpose of this entire project, and really it's a good idea to continue this phase or continue this assessment of the community, and we would suggest every 2 to 5 years or some kind of intermediate time frame frame in between that. So 2, 3, 4, or 5 years is what most of our clients will do. When we go to our next slide, we'll see methodology. As a part of that framing up of the purpose of this, it's important to also kind of understand how we did it. It'd be one thing for me to just go out there and say, hey, you know, I got these results. I asked a few people on the streets. Things are looking pretty good. And then I come in here and just kind of explain how good things are, just based on my small perception. So what we want to do is cast a really wide net. And in a community such as yours, we're really lucky because we're able to cast that net across all residential households in the community. So basically, we're able to look at your lists that you can provide. We're able to look at USPS master mailing lists, and we're able to get a really good idea of how many households are in the community. And we'll mail surveys to those households, and then we'll publicize the survey through all different other methodologies. So you may have seen some social media ads, you may have received a text message or an email, you may have received a postcard in the mail, and these are all additional administration activities to ensure that we're following up with those respondents that are highly unlikely to respond on that initial contact attempt. So most of you probably received a paper survey in a packet. You unfold that, it's got a nice cover letter, it's got the full survey instrument, and about 90% of you just toss it in the trash right away. And that's perfectly fine. We expect that to happen. And that's why our methodology is a mixed mode methodology that calls for us to continue to follow up with respondents until reaching a goal. The difficult part about communities the size of Baldwin City is that goal is really hard to set. We want it to be statistically significant, but we don't want to set a goal that we can't achieve. And so usually for a project this size, for a community the size of Baldwin City, I'd set out to collect 250 completed surveys. That would be a robust enough goal to keep our margin of error below 6%. And it would be enough surveys where we could split out the data by maybe race, ethnicity features, income features, and things like that. And so that was really my goal. I was like, if we're going to mail all these surveys out, I'm going to do all these follow-up techniques, I think that 250 would be a really good shot. I think we'd have a good shot at getting at that. As you can see on the screen, 402 surveys were completed. Now, we left administration open a little bit longer, continued to follow up respondents a little bit longer than we normally would have. But what that does is it heightens the reliability of the results and shrinks the margin of error. And so the margin of error is calculated at the 95% level of confidence, which means we're basically assessing how many times out of 100 are we going to get these same results. And we would suggest that this margin of error holds true 95 out of those 100 times. So if we randomly get folks to fill out surveys, we get 402 of those completed from 402 different households in the community. 95 out of 100 times, we're going to get these same results plus or minus our margin of error of about 4.7% or about 4.5%. And so what that means is that 55% of folks say yes to a particular question. We could say at a pretty good degree, a high level of certainty, that anytime we ask those same questions of anybody on the street, it's either going to be a 50 or 55% or maybe a 60% chance that they say yes to that question. And so there's kind of that plus or minus. So if we get 55% on the survey, we might do the survey again, get 402 responses, and we might see that it's at 50% saying yes, or we could see that climb as high as, really 59.7%. And so that's kind of how the reliability and the margin of error works. What's really important, and what we'll see on our next slide, is that we're not only trying to make sure that we're getting the most number of surveys as possible, because the larger the sample, the more reliable the results, the lower our margin of error becomes. It's really important to make sure that those results aren't coming from some of our most affluent communities or just from neighborhoods that we know to respond well. So ETC Institute needs to follow up in a manner that continues to grasp at those areas that aren't responding well. So there's a couple of points for this slide. The first one is we're going to see some shaded maps based on these zones here. These zones kind of split the community basically into quadrants, but we have some of those peripheries out there to the east and to the west, and obviously the lake down to the southeast. And those are just some areas where there's not a lot of residential households. So when you see those areas shaded in your GIS maps, which we'll look at a few here, we just need to kind of take that with a grain of salt. There's not a lot of respondents in that particular area, so the weight of a single response can have a massive impact on the shading of those results. What's really great about this map is that we had a good distribution of responses from throughout the city. And when we talk about those four major quadrants, there's a good number of responses in each one of those to make significant inferences based on the opinions, understandings, and perceptions of residents in those areas. An added layer of that is on our next slide. We need to also understand who's responding. So we know Baldwin City is diverse. We know that there are different income types, different age, race, ethnicity types in the community. We need to make sure that those are represented at a statistically significant level. So as you can see here, we're looking at household composition types, gender, and race ethnicity factors compared to the percentage at which they exist in the survey, compared to the percentage at which the census estimates those populations to exist in our community. And as you can see, we're well within our margin of error for many of those factors. And it's really important for ETC Institute to make sure, again, those follow-up techniques are targeting those groups for which they didn't respond well to the initial contact attempts. And that's to ensure that the results are accurately and in an aggregate sense are representing the opinions, beliefs, perceptions, ratings of most, or if not all, Baldwin City residents. And so we'll see some variability in the results, meaning some folks are dissatisfied, some folks are generally satisfied. But what we really want to do is get a good picture and understanding that we touched everybody. Everybody's represented in the results to some degree. And we did a really good job blanketing the community with surveys. When we go to our next slide, we'll see the bottom line up front. This is really my 2 cents on the results. If you leave with nothing else here tonight, I hope that you understand residents in Baldwin City are pretty satisfied with their quality of life here. When we look at those first ratings, almost 90% of residents rate the city as an excellent or good place to live, and 88% rate the city as an excellent or good place to raise children. Now, those are those features that maybe aren't really flashy, but almost 9 out of 10 respondents told us, yeah, I like living here. This is an excellent or good place to live. And yes, I would recommend this as an excellent or good place to raise your children. And so those are some of those features in the survey that I think really tell us the major story of how the rest of your results fall. The overall quality of life, the overall perceptions of residents are extremely high. What's better is that when I compare your results to both national and regional results, we see that you're performing much more strongly than some of our national and regional comparisons. And so that's back to the context. So it's important to frame up the project, understand why and how we did it, but it's also really important to understand that maybe a 66% satisfaction rating isn't low when we compare it to other ratings of similar types or from other similar cities. And so if we move forward now 2 slides, this is just a intro slide. We'll see the overall ratings of Baldwin City. And so all of my slides tonight are pretty much going to be out to the left are going to be our positive ratings. Those are going to be excellent, goods, very satisfied, satisfied. Anything out to the right, it's usually going to be the sum of below average or poor, or the sum of very dissatisfied and dissatisfied. And the reason for that is that there are just so few of those negative responses throughout many of the charts. It doesn't make sense to break them up and not in others. So we've summed those together and provided the results in this particular format. Now, the neutral ratings are always going to sit in the middle. They're typically going to be gray or yellow. Those are considered a passing grade. So you didn't make a positive impact nor a negative impact on that particular respondent. They know that you offer the service or have the item within the community, but they weren't able to kind of give you that positive or negative. So really, that's a passing grade rating there. So you can see, vast majority of folks think that the community is a place to raise children, live, and retire, are excellent. As a place you'd buy your next home and as a place to work, we see slightly elevated levels of below average or poor ratings. But we're kind of seeing that national trend of folks just being a little bit more, or I guess a little less comfortable with kind of telling us that they'd buy a home in any particular community just based on the way that home prices are setting. And we kind of just need to understand Baldwin City's a little bit further outside of our KC metro area. So Baldwin City might not always be a great place to work, but it is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise our children. It might be just the greatest distance away from our work, but we didn't really assess, is it a good distance from your work? Are you able to get away from that work and not see your coworkers at home? Those types of questions we don't really ask here. And maybe in a future survey, just kind of understanding what Baldwin City is, maybe we don't ask, Baldwin City is a place to work. When we move to our next slide, we'll see additional perception-related items. Here we get into satisfaction. As you can see, until we get to the bottom 2 ratings, we have extremely high levels of satisfaction with vast majority of respondents saying that I'm either very satisfied or satisfied with any of those particular items on the chart. When we get to value received for tax dollars and fees, we see 1 out of 3 respondents in the negative. That has been a national trend to some degree, and I don't think I mentioned this to Mayor and some of the other council members. You'd almost be surprised not to see that number higher in some communities as of late. Over the last 2.5 to 3 years, we've seen a significant climb of ratings in the negative in that particular category. And then when we talk about managing growth and development in communities, that's always kind of the eye of the beholder. So we're expected to see some up and down ratings there. And while we don't have 33% in the dissatisfied, we have a large group, almost 4 out of 10 respondents, saying that they're just neutral to that particular item. When we go to our next slide, we'll see how safe folks feel in the community. This is where another one of those examples where we just can't chart the very unsafe and the unsafes alone. They would just be decimal points on these particular tables. As we can see, over 90% or nearly 90%, 89% and above are extremely satisfied or feel very safe in their community. And now we'll go to our overall satisfaction with the major categories of city services. And so this question is a comprehensive question at really a 20,000 foot view of your core categories of city services. Now, a lot of these questions had specific categories within the survey themselves where we'd get a little bit more fine-tuned in terms of, what does it mean about maintenance of streets, or how do you think about public safety and all of these other specific service features. But as you can see here, extremely high levels of satisfaction, really with half the items or more than half the items up. And what I've done with those arrows is just highlighted the items that are top priorities for improvement based on that important satisfaction analysis. And I want us just to kind of be thinking about some of those particular items. It's the quality of our electric service, effectiveness of our city communication, maintenance of our city streets and sidewalks, and enforcement of our local codes and ordinances, which can be one of those tough items because you're either being enforced upon or you're hoping for others to be enforced upon, and you don't always get your way in terms of code enforcement. So that's always kind of a contentious issue. We did have a codes enforcement section where we were able to kind of dig a little bit deeper and determine, what are some of those contributing factors. But based on the satisfaction levels to those questions, as well as the high emphasis or importance questions that we rated on those same items, we determined those 4 areas to be top priorities for improvement moving forward. Now, if we move forward 2 more slides past our benchmarking, we'll see just kind of a quick summary here. You had 62 items on the survey that we were able to rate directly to our benchmarking database. We take great pride in our benchmarking database. We update it every year. We don't only just do a national survey, but we do regional surveys. And one of the things that's great about working with our firm is that we do almost every municipality kind of in a 35, 45 mile buffer zone around Kansas City. And so we've got a lot of great comparisons that aren't just national, aren't just regional, but we can actually compare you to Kansas, Missouri communities. And so we know the area is a little bit unique. We know a lot of our clients are asking a lot of the same questions. And so when we get to our next slide, we'll see comparisons of Baldwin City versus that Kansas, Missouri average versus our national average, which really speaks to how high and how good your overall ratings are. Baldwin City is labeled in orange. Our highest benchmarking opportunity is going to be that Kansas, Missouri average. The reason why I say that is that it's a very difficult average to overcome, primarily because a lot of the communities that make up that average have been doing this survey every 2 years for decades. And so they've been assessing their performance in all these key areas. This is the first time we've assessed these categories for the city of Baldwin City. So we didn't know what we didn't know until we completed the survey. It turns out we're performing extremely well when we put ourselves up to others in the community. If we go to our next slide, we'll see the perceptions and how those stack up. Overall quality of downtown, astronomically high compared to our national average and our regional average. Even overall quality of life, extremely high, 5 percentage points above our regional average. Going down to the bottom, we talk about how well the city's managing growth, and that's a really good contextualization of those results. We would look at that and say 36% satisfaction, that's terrible. Only 1 in 3 respondents are saying they're very satisfied or satisfied with how well we're managing growth in our community. Well, as you can see, both nationally and regionally, communities struggle with that particular option. We don't always see eye to eye with our respondents. We don't always tell them, or more so, they're not always here in our meetings to kind of understand what we are doing in terms of growth and development. And that can be a really difficult issue. Overall value received for your tax dollars and fees, regionally much higher. Nationally, you're just right there along those national lines. When we go forward 2 more slides, we'll talk about our priorities for improvement. I talk about them as priorities for improvement just because the analysis. They're really just opportunities for improvement or opportunities for future investment. These items should be taken into consideration when we're doing our next budget process. These are our major categories of services again, but we reframed the question, requested that respondents only provide us with 3 options out of the full list there and tell us which ones are really the most important for the city to provide. In other communities, we'll ask which ones should be emphasized, which ones do you want to see the greatest improvements to, which should we fund more tax dollars with. The whole intent of the question is to understand what's most important to you. If an area is very below average satisfaction, but it's not overly important to residents, there's no reason for our community to invest heavily in that service because it will have minimal impact. What we're focusing on are the items that are both below average satisfaction, and as you can see here, the top 4 most important items in our list. If we go to our next slide, we'll see a table that's come straight from the report, but I've kind of stripped it of the labels in the report. I like to provide a little bit different of an analysis for the presentation because I'm able to hear and answer questions or discuss these items. Items in green are those items for which are lesser important and you performed extremely well, not comparatively speaking, but just generally compared to the other items in this question. Items in yellow are those items that I took a look at and played with the numbers and determined small increases in importance or small decreases in overall satisfaction could push that item into a top priority category. We say that is an important satisfaction rating of 0.10 or above. So I played with the numbers a little bit. The overall efforts by the city to ensure you're prepared for emergencies could kind of teeter in any particular direction. So we just want to make sure we're messaging, educating, and a lot of these items towards the top of our list, while the overall maintenance of city streets and quality of our electrical services are kind of those ability, we're able to touch and feel and see some of those service items. Some of the other items are much more an educational increasement of investment. So in terms of enforcement of local codes and ordinances, we shouldn't get out there and over-enforce on our residents, because that will only push dissatisfaction from those folks that were generally probably satisfied before. But we should be more so taking an approach of educating. So what is really an infraction in the winter? Are we really supposed to be shoveling our snow on our sidewalks? Should we really be making sure that our grass is cut in the spring? Should I be parking my boat in front of my home in the spring? And so some of those areas are really just educational, that we can go a long way in kind of keeping down or tamping down on infractions, really by self-enforcement in those terms. And overall effectiveness of communication by the government, again, an educational thing, just continue to inform, continue to reach out. And a survey like this can kind of clue us into where we should be reaching out to residents more frequently, where they're listening to us and trying to find us, and maybe closing some of those gaps as well. In terms of your performance, communication is going to be key to the continued high performance that we experienced in this survey. When we go to our next slide, we'll see some of those GIS maps that I was telling you about earlier. As I mentioned, we shade those maps based on the mean rating within those boundaries. As you can see here, the overall maintenance of city streets and sidewalks, just basically everybody in the community is kind of just in that neutral category. They're not overly dissatisfied. They're not overly satisfied with that particular rating. And when we could probably scroll through the next two slides fairly quickly. This is overall quality of electric utility services and enforcement of codes and ordinances. We see the same things. So generally, folks are feeling the same way about all of those services. And the reason that I mentioned the number of dots within each one of those categories, we're good on that final map there, the overall effectiveness of city communication. We've got a couple of those areas. Oh, if we could go just back to that map, thank you. We've got a couple areas on that map that are shaded blue, which are telling us, hey, folks are generally satisfied. We need to be careful about making assumptions on that, just because of the few number of respondents within each one of those sub areas. And so there are fewer respondents, fewer residential households in those particular areas of the community. We see slightly deviated responses in that furthest west and furthest south zone. And we did have a good number of responses in that northwest zone. So there is some sense that folks are more generally satisfied than the rest of town in that particular area. Now, if we go forward 2 slides, we'll see question 20. We wanted to understand from respondents, where are you getting information about the city? I've highlighted again with those arrows the communication sources for which respondents would most prefer to use to get information about the city. And so we've done a really great job pushing social media. Folks are really interested in getting their information from the city in that particular format. What's great is that 40%, 4 out of 10 respondents told us that they're already paying attention to the newsletter and the utility bills, which was started only 3 months ago. So that investment has definitely paid off for you all. City's website's also coming in at 40%. And where some of those areas are that we can begin to close those gaps is that email newsletter. 1 out of 10 respondents indicated that they've used the newsletter approximately, but a lot of folks are telling us that they'd prefer that to be one of the major sources of communication for them from the city. So this has kind of clued us into where we could focus more efforts. We need to continue a social media presence. We need to continue our newsletters. We need to push our website and our email newsletters, and that's going to take, gathering more emails and getting more opt-ins and things like that. Now, what we'll constantly see in smaller communities is word of mouth. That from friends and neighbors is kind of always up there. We just always need to be careful about that, because if that's the primary mode of communication, then we're often playing that game of telephone, and we can find ourselves kind of in hot water in terms of, I was at that meeting, or were you really at that meeting? This is what they said. Is that truly what they said? And so we just need to be really careful about some of that. But if we go to our next slide, I wanted to show a few more comparisons kind of out of line here. We're comparing nationally and regionally extremely well when it comes to our overall quality of services. Now, there are some communities in the area that perform exceptionally well in that blue bar, but as you can see, we're very competitive with them. And considering this is the first time we've assessed any of those areas for the city in this type of way, we're performing extremely well. Now, if we go forward 2 more slides, we'll see customer service. This is one of the areas that I wanted to put towards the end, because I think all your staff deserve a really strong pat on the back. We had a very good number, 53%, over half of our respondents indicated that they contacted the city in some form or fashion during the past year. Of those, a vast majority indicated it was either very easy or easy to contact the person that they needed to reach. Now, in a community like this, we've got county roads and state roads, we've got county services and amenities, we've got state services and amenities kind of surrounding us. And if we go to our next slide, we would expect for respondents not necessarily to leave, all these conversations or coming to City Hall or making a phone call. We wouldn't necessarily expect them to be generally satisfied or overly satisfied with their experience. That's not because staff isn't taking care of them, as we can see on the screen, but it's primarily due to that red tape. If you call about a state highway, sorry, I can give you the telephone number, or maybe I can even transfer you to KDOT or our regional centers. But the vast majority of folks that indicated they'd contacted you indicated that staff were courteous and polite. They helped resolve those issues to satisfaction. They were prompt, accurate, and complete in their answers, and they did what they said they would do in a timely manner, with very few of those 53 respondents saying anything to the contrary. So I think that's a really high mark here. Any of your forward-facing staff definitely deserve a lot of kudos for these particular ratings, because they truly are setting the bar for excellent customer service there. When we go forward 2 more slides, this is one of the other really bright spots of the survey results. Overall, you performed exceptionally well. Those kind of quality of life ratings, extremely high. Your comparisons, considering this is your first survey, are extremely high. But one of the things that I had the opportunity to do that I don't always have the opportunity to do is talk to council and mayor when we're starting to develop this survey. One of the priorities from council was that we need to assess whether or not we're on the right track. We have these strategic priorities, we develop them as a council. Are we on the same page as everybody? And this is a really great opportunity, considering we have 402 voices, we have a really strong margin of error, we have representation within the results. It's an excellent opportunity to kind of test that messaging. As you can see here, the very supportive and supportive responses dominate the slides. Those items out to the left in question 27 are your strategic priorities. So we asked respondents, how supportive are you of the city investing in each one of these categories? And we can see overwhelmingly respondents are very, very supportive of you investing in the categories that you indicated should be the city's strategic priorities. When we move to question 28, what we would typically see in a slide like this is that everybody's very supportive of everything, but 2 or 3 items maybe top the list. So we'll see a couple of really strong bars, 60, 70, 80%, selecting the items as one of their top 3 choices. But as you can see here, everything is relatively close. Now, the top one isn't necessarily close to the bottom one. But as you can see, none of them are overly or exceptionally more selected than any of the others as we ascend through that list, which tells us not only did we pick all the right strategic priorities based on question 27, but respondents are going to be willing and interested in the city investing in just about all those categories. Now, it kind of gives us a roadmap in terms of maybe which ones to knock off the list first, but generally speaking, I think this is phenomenal to understand that council was almost reading the minds of respondents and residents in the community. And what this really tells us is that you all were on the same page from the start, which I think is just phenomenal, considering I'm a councilman in my own community. I can guarantee you, if my council and I developed strategic priorities, we would probably not receive these same results. We'd be in a completely different situation. So this is really good stuff. And when we get to our summary in our next slide, Lynn, we'll see residents have an extremely positive perception of the community. It's not just based on the delivery of city services. It's the fact that leadership's on the same page as they are. They're prioritizing the same items that residents think are very, very important to their households. Satisfaction in your community is much higher than national and regional numbers that we're able to compare you in. There are some areas for which you perform below our regional averages, but well above national, and some of the vice versa. The overall story is that you performed extremely well, considering this is the first time we've asked respondents these questions. We should continue to focus on some of the important satisfaction analysis found in the reporting. We should continue to help make sure that's informing and at least helping to play a role in our budgeting process. But it's clear council and staff are on the same page as the residents, and you're really guiding the city into a really strong place. I'm excited for the employee survey. I'm hoping to see similar strong results. It'll be kind of dependent on this guy over here. I'm just saying. Don't want to put too much pressure on it, but we're going to assist with that as well. I was really pleased with the way that the results turned out. I know I consulted with staff a little bit here before the survey went out. Some staff were like, hey, people are going to beat us up here or beat us up there. The contextualizations really help play a role in understanding, do communities just beat up particular services? And yes, they do. And we could see that in some of our management of growth, our value of city tax dollars, and things like that. And then where Baldwin City excels are those quality of life ratings. Those areas that are really going to be, people leave Baldwin City and go to work, or they leave Baldwin City and go on vacation. They're going to say, I live in a really excellent place to raise my kids. I have an excellent quality of life. My electric utility services, I hate paying that bill, but everything else is going really well. And so the moral of the story, or really the overall story of the results, is you're performing exceptionally well. You should be really proud of the work that you've done and proud of your staff. And I hope that we continue this process and this relationship, and we're able to reassess in a couple of years or 3 years how we've done and how we've performed. So with that, again, I promise to take any questions that you all might have. And if I can't answer them here, I'll obviously get back to the drawing board and get a response out to you. I know.
Sure enough for months.
She's got a KU game to get back home to. I don't know.
That's right.
I tried to make it fast. Yeah, sorry, just for you.
One statistic on there
Yeah.
that I kind of wanted to touch on. So I know that we gave a little bit of an additional timeline for people to respond to.
Mhm.
But your mark, I'm guessing, of 175, come
250.
250, I'm guessing comes from somewhere, a certain percentage of certain.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so-
kind of based on your households.
It is the number of response that we got 402. Is that a statistic in itself? That-
Yes. You oversampled your population basically.
Right.
Which would lend itself to poorer results. And the reason is that we'll have the initial respondents. It'll be older, more affluent respondents first. It'll be those folks that have a really strong opinion, either positive or negative. And as you continue to follow up, typically what you're drawing out are more negative opinions. Like, yeah, I am fed up enough to respond to the survey finally.
Right.
We didn't necessarily see that here. And what we did, again, was heighten the reliability of the results, represented more and more households in the community, and you weren't worse for the wear for it. But yeah, what we would typically do is try to get about 10% of your household sampled, but we sampled everybody. I think you're right around 3,000, just under 3,000 total households in the community, residential households. And so I thought 250 would be an appropriate goal. At ETC Institute, we're a little bit different than some other consulting firms that do the same work, where they will say, we're going to mail your survey, we're going to do a couple follow-ups, and then what we get is what we get, and we'll weight the rest of the results. Now, that's fine, but then I'd have to come in here and explain math to you all. And then I'd have to say, well, yeah, the results look good, but I had to weight them. I had to weight them based on what I got. And so our firm has really always taken the stance of let's beat down the doors of all of these people in the community, get them to respond, and that way we're providing our clients with more reliable results overall. And then I don't have to stand up here and explain the weighting that I hate doing. So,
And to clarify, each result was only one household. So
Yes.
two people from one house submitted a survey.
Yep.
And that was.
Yep. We had a few duplicates, but not enough to really present that as an anecdotal set of data. We do like San Antonio survey. There we'll get like 1,200 completed surveys from the randomly sampled population, and then we might have like 1,000 others that are really getting in there just to complete the survey. Now, you see a major dip in the overall satisfaction, and that's because those are choice participators. Here in the city, we had those choice participators. We had the people we really had to hound to get to complete the survey. And then we had the people that are just going to take it, no matter who they are, no matter what. But it was a really good exercise. It was great to be able to work with staff. I was really pleased with the way that it turned out. 402 really blew my mind. I'm working with a similar community in Texas, similarly sized, not similar to Baldwin City. We barely eked out 225, and I told them I thought I could get 250 easy. So it's not always easy to do this. So.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to publicly thank Ryan and ETC. I think you guys did a fantastic job.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate all the time you spent with the Strategic Planning Committee. I think it's extremely valuable. There's a lot of data here that we can certainly use, but nothing but positives to say about you and your organization.
I appreciate
Look forward
that.
to Continuing to work.
Yeah. And as you dig in more, if you hire another consultant for strategic planning, or if you've got anybody in-house that's interested, we'll run those additional crosstabs. We'll do that additional data. If somebody needs the raw data, we strip all the pertinent information or the personally identifiable information from respondents out, but we still leave you with the geographic idea. So, it might not be on top of your house, it might just be generally around your home, but we have the ability to give you the data that you can continue to manipulate and make use of. So I think that's really important to know too.
Just a heads up, we're going to be coming back at you to help us kind of parse the data and help us present it
Yep.
as a backdrop of the strategic
Yeah.
plan so that we can use the data for all the performance indicators.
Yep.
And have data, then they can back up where we're at as the baseline.
Yep.
And as we go forward. So we're going to need some help with that.
Yeah. That's what we're here for. So. All
All right,
Well,
thank
it was a
you.
pleasure. Thanks so much, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. I hope you get out of here in time for tip-off. Is at 8?
Yeah.
Rock chalky.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right.
I think the only other thing I wanted to bring up is you mentioned how, we did want to use it to see how aligned we were kind of the second pass, because this council spent years trying to get voice of the community to develop a strategic plan. And we've been in a lot of those meetings, and we had a lot of feedback. So this was a first chance to see if we really were another one of those voice of the community things. And I think we were lined up because we spent that time going out and asking what's important. And I think it reflects about, yeah, we told you it's important and it's still important. So that wasn't this group, just deciding this is what we should do. It was that whole process. So to me, that was a huge, I think, positive out of this was it kind of just validated all that effort that we are on the right track to what the citizens think we need to do. So.
And I'm glad that we hired somebody to do that because it was done the right way.
Yeah.
Professionally, and they, did all the analyzing and everything. I think that's what we needed to do to
Unbiased,
start off.
Yeah. And they're very, they do this, they do it all the time. So we never got out of the gate if we try to do this internally.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen.
I think someone tried that one, so.
We did
Really
it
bad
for a while,
survey
and
monkey
then
results.
it's-
We tried.
So kudos to the council for funding it. I think it was money well spent.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
This is excellent
I don't know if
data.
he knows that we had a multi-year agreement, so I think the council needs to decide, he mentioned every other year probably makes sense. We need to make sure our contract allows that to happen. It was like 3 years, maybe it's 3 events, but I think we need to figure out, do we do this every year? Or we would do it every other year to let the things that we try to do to impact it actually have some time to impact it. And I think that was his recommendation.
I think it would be good to do it the next year too, just to see how they respond again. Maybe we improve something that was on the list, and I don't know, I just think it'd be beneficial to know 2 years in a row how it's doing.
I was thinking about that, kind of, if you did it every 2 years, then you're most definitely giving every council member at least 2 chances to go in and try some different angles. If you do it every 3, if you time it right, I think you can also achieve that. So I wonder if it might be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, as we come up to budget season, this should drive at least the amount that we have some say over, which isn't all that much in the budget. But the things that we have to decide we want to go do with the department leads and staff should be driven by what we got out of this. And then if we go do some things to try to impact it, then we can see, I don't know if it's going to be long enough time to see it the next one, or it takes 2 years to implement. I mean, you're talking about streets and sidewalks. That's not a short process, right?
Right.
So,
And some of those things we have in the works now, the projects haven't came. So I think you almost have to do every 2 years, just as slow as some of these projects hit.
I think we can make that call, and we just need to validate with ETC what our limits are for what we contracted for, but then toward the end of this year, or maybe mid-year, we can kind of have this conversation and decide if we want to try to do it again in October, or do we want to wait a year and make the call then.
I agree with what she said, 1 year. But, and then after that, maybe 2 years or 3 years, because we're going to see some growth. I think it's working that way. And it would be interesting to see in that growth, or in that development, how it would change from the last year that we had it done. But to get it 2 years in a row, I think, is not a bad deal, but from that point on, it ought to go for 2 years or maybe even 3.
I think that's a good point, Jerry. I mean, I think, because we had questions, when you saw the respondents on managing growth, we was near the bottom, but it was never asked, was it too much or too little? I
Right.
mean, you could have a group of people that it was too much and a group that was too little. And then overall, it's gonna be poor. So not enough information there to figure out, well, what are they telling us? Right? Are they telling us that we're not growing fast enough, or we're not,
In a 2 or 3 year,
But we can do that next year by refining it and asking for a different question that would determine that. Things like that.
In a 2-year period after the next year, we'll be able to tell, or the next council will be able to tell if we're progressing as
Yep.
we should, or if we got in stalemate.
Yep.
Of course, other things in the world take place over that too, you know.
Right.
Good. All right. Old business. First item on the agenda is water ordinance, second reading. Is there anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Glenn, do you want to present on this, or Ben, whoever? I know we talked about it last meeting, but
Right, yeah, this is an amended ordinance. You remember, we have a rate ordinance in place, so this amends that. And the way we did it was to change the usage and the base fee on this. And going forward, it would be tied to a municipal cost index rather than doing what we had done previously, which was a percentage. We're going up 5% or whatever that was. So this takes that portion out and just leaves it going forward based on that percentage, which will change every year then. And that'll be what it is. They can't predict that at this point. So that would be the logic behind it, is to raise it according to that index. So otherwise, it's the same.
or decrease.
Well, right, it could, yeah, the index, just like PCA or something like that, it could go up or down. So that would be the way that would work. But it's always tied to that index going forward, rather than just having a straight percentage like we had previously talked about and considered.
Which, just to be clear for people listening, is more or less a measure of how inflation affects municipalities.
It is inflation index, yeah. So the cost, it's just called something else, but it basically is an inflation index. So we've seen high inflation for the past few years, but then we've also seen it drop. And, so who knows? It's unpredictable. But previously, we just had a percentage in there that would be set, and we'd go forward with that. So, but anyway, that's the change in this. So anyway.
So Mara, if you want to pull up that, just to kind of to dovetail on what Glenn's talking about, how we got to those numbers, because this is the second reading. Remember, we had the first reading. We had the 3-year plan that we talked about, went back to Budget and Finance Committee, and so this is, it's in your packet. So this is what Glenn was referring to, what the amended second reading of the ordinance would use as the numbers, as the costs or the charges. So if you remember what we showed last time up at the top in the light blue is we were trying to go for it. We were 2023. You can see on the end cash, we were negative in cash in the water fund. So if you remember our discussion, we were trying to get back to our end cash reserve balance policy of at least 15% by 2026. So if you look at 24, what you'll see in the amended ordinance is that rate increase per 1,000 gallons to $16.18 from what I think was $14.07 last year. And the other thing we're proposed to change after council discussion was we're going to move to a debt fee instead of just a random $12 base fee. And you can see that the debt payment is $14.68. So those are the numbers you'll see in the amended ordinance. And if you just look at 25 and 26, what you see in 26 is that, if our assumptions are correct, we'll get back to that reserve policy by 2026 and be very close by 2025, which is the goal. So just wanted to share, and just if you look at to the right, what these rate increases capture is, we capture the wholesale water costs that we weren't passing through for the last 4 years. So that catches us up there. It gets us to our policy in 3 years. It includes, this year includes that 2.5% MCI, as does, and next year will be calculated in, and then 26 as well. So you can see the projected 2025 is more than that projected 2.5%. because again, we're still trying to catch up to that reserve and get the policy. And what we've agreed as a council, we want to do this every year and look at make changes to the rates as required to follow this plan or change it if something else happens.
Also, I'll just add on to that the meter debt fee that's on there actually drops down here in 2025.
Next year.
Yeah, so that part of this goes away because debts are being paid off. So that we'll see as we grow and as our debts get paid off, that fee drops down to just service debts. Yeah.
So the next couple slides, you guys, I mean, this talks to that. This really does talk about, you have a question?
Does the charge for the raw water change with the city?
Yes, every year.
Yeah, every year, yeah, from the war,
Go from two.
it changes every year. I mean,
I have to look it up. What did it go from
yeah.
and go to?
Yes.
I'd have to go look it up. It
yeah,
was,
I don't know that number off the top of my head either. But they change it every year. They adjust
I know
their,
they do, but-
yeah, but I do, yeah, I don't know off the
I
top of
think
my
it's
head.
around 5% increase.
It's generally, yeah, it always has been.
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you.
no, yeah, I saw it. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I can't
We
remember.
just haven't been passing it along.
Right.
So this is a bigger jump than we would have for sure needed to make, but we had to capture all that. Start
Yes.
capturing it,
Yes,
so
yes,
Yep.
kind of ripping the Band-Aid off.
That's the thing that I would, my next question, if I were going to ask one, would be about 25. How did you figure 25?
Well-
But you can't.
No, we can't, other than so worst case scenario is it's based on number of gallons, we kept that flat. So that could change depending on weather and residents, right? So all you can do is make an assumption of worst case, same number of gallons we use, it typically goes up every year.
Yes.
If that stays the same and everything else stays the same, which it's not going to, it's going
It's not going to stay the same.
we would need to, the rate you saw in 25 is what we need to have to get to that reserve for 25 and then what we need in 26. So it's just a plan. That's why November next year, we'll have this discussion, see where we're at, see if it still makes sense, and then amend the ordinance in January to what we need to do.
No, I don't see that surrounded in concrete for 25.
No. That's just, the only thing we're
Yes.
voting on today is
Yes,
at
yes,
24.
Yes, yes.
So nothing's gonna be
Yes, I know.
set in stone. So I think that the confusing part that I think people are gonna struggle with is what we decided as a council to get more transparency is to get rid of just the base meter fee, which is actually baked into the rate. You didn't really see it anyway. It was baked into the actual water rate, and do a debt payment. So everything that this utility has in debt has payments. Like there's there's leases and bonds that each have their own payment that are due in 2024, right? So you can add up what our payments are for that debt, divided by the number of meters you have, and that's what everybody's meter share would be on a monthly basis to pay off, to make those payments this year, right? So that's how we were going to set that. And to Casey's point, it's $14.68 this year, but we have a bond dropping off this year. So it goes away next year. So that $14.68, I think, drops to like $9.50, something like that.
Under $10.
So you'll see that debt payment of $14.68 every month. Next year it'll be $9.50, unless for some reason we have to go out and get more debt for this utility.
Right.
Right. So people will see it as we do things, as a council, future councils do things. That debt payment fee will rise and fall based on what's needed to do for the infrastructure, right? And it's very clear where your money's going. And all this graph shows you is an example of, for a 5,000 gallon household, 1 month, what we're proposing, the current water bill charges, the names, you had a water rate fee, you had a franchise fee, and you had a water fee, which we're still trying to figure out. It was like 28 cents. Trying to figure out what that is, but it was really inconsequential. What we're proposing is to go to 3 lines, a water fee, which is your rate, and just the debt payment fee we've just talked about. That's going to just be talking about what's needed to make those debt payments for the year, and then just the same franchise fee, 5% franchise fee. So you still have 3 lines, there'll be different 3 lines, and really all this graph's trying to show you is that if you took a 5,000 gallon example for a month, using the, using the 2024 debt payment rate versus the $12 rate for the base meter fee, you can see that you'd have to have 95.58. You actually have to have a water rate of 1912 instead of 1618. Because remember, in that 1912, it carries that $12 base meter and carries all the debt payments too. It's all in there. You just can't tell what it is. All you see is a water rate of 1912. So if you look to the one to the right is what the proposed one would be, is like all we want is in that water rate is what the operations costs or what that rate is to run the utility. And it's, that's the 1618. And then you can see at 1468 as a separate line, that's the debt payment, right? And then the franchise fee is the same amount because it's calculated off those 2 numbers. So what really all we're doing is same amount, it's going to show up differently. You're going to know where that amount's going. So we propose to try it on the water utility because we're making those rate changes this year. And then ideally we get to there on electric when we have to make that, and we get there on wastewater as well. So questions, concerns?
Yeah. Hypothetically, in the movement towards progress, won't the debt service change as time goes on?
Yeah.
And become higher, correct?
No, next year it becomes lower.
Now those are
Not the beginning of it, or should it?
Well, so we got 4 vehicles, 4, I think they're all bonds.
There's no leases on
Yeah, so we got 4 bonds that we're paying on for different things,
Right.
So we got 4 bonds, they expire in different years.
Yes,
It's like one has 1 year left this year.
yes,
It's got a payment of.
yes. And that
So-
lowers that rate for next year, I understand.
Yep. So what's the question? I missed it.
With the development that's going to occur,
Yeah.
will that change the
Yeah.
debt rate?
We
You're
don't
adding
pay,
meters.
we don't
It
pay,
reduces it.
we don't pay for any of that.
It reduces
You have more people sharing the debt.
it reduces your
Grow.
fee as you grow.
So we're not doing any bonds to build infrastructure.
I'll come back with that someday, but I'm not.
No, does that make sense though? We're not,
Yeah, I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. And actually, what you say makes sense.
yeah, so there's no
But for some
incremental
reason,
debt for those.
For some
us.
reason or other, it just doesn't click quite all the way.
Okay,
Well, a lot of
that's fair. It's a little different, but yes.
The infrastructure as we grow falls primarily on the developer, if we have to bring infrastructure to a certain part of town in some kind of a big
Yeah.
bond, I mean, that's what we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But the idea is that as you grow, you are spreading out that bond payment and that debt fee. And I think a lot of people are probably gonna get a little sticker shock at first, because they're gonna see that new 1468 on their bill, and they're gonna go, what is this? But they're not, you gotta look over at the math, that the rate went down, and that it's just in that effort of, as Scott said, of transparency to really, before when we did, what did we call it before the debt fee? What was it called?
Meter fee.
The meter fee.
But it wasn't called out on the bill.
It wasn't called anything,
It's in the rate.
but it was,
It's in the ordinance.
It did have a title, it was in ordinances, and it was in perpetuity until you changed it and raised it the next time. Whereas this one is variable, like in
Yeah.
2025, it is gonna go down, and that's important to reiterate. Because I think, when I first get this bill, I mean, my wife is gonna take a double look at it, I'm pretty familiar with it, but, it's gonna look different, but the math does equal the same, and instead of the one being a constantly raising number, that debt fee, it is a variable one that, for example, next year does go down.
I've had it long enough to think about it. Does the city furnish the meter to the customer?
That's part of their construction fee.
Is that part of the construction, or does the
Mhm.
contractor that puts in the services, does he do that?
When you get your building permit, then you pay the fee for your.
I'm sorry,
When you get your building permit, then that's when you pay your fee for your meter.
pays the meter fee. So meters go up on a yearly basis. So as meters increase in cost, how come we don't receive a higher debt rate?
The actual physical meter?
The actual physical meter, let's say the meter costs
Right.
$50 per day, but next year it costs $75.
I think whatever it costs, like I know when we just
That
bought.
has an
Installation charge.
Yeah, they pass that on to the,
Yeah.
to the
You pass
person.
that
It goes on to the customer or the developer if they're
Yeah.
putting them in.
I just bought one. I bought a 2-inch meter.
But then we got it for years to come.
That's a separate line item. That's not a part of these. I mean, that's a separate line item on the budget where it comes in as a installation fee or whatever.
And
It's
I
not
agree.
in the rate.
It's not in the
It
rate.
should be the fact that when, as development grows, that rate should go cheaper, with the exception.
With the exception of.
Oh, I see what
not
you're
the project.
saying. No.
With the exception of what's gonna happen.
So I think what you're saying, Jerry, is you're spreading out that payment over more meters. So it should be less for everybody. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're gonna have, let's forget about debt cost. You're gonna have a higher cost regardless of what we got, as you have a development, because we're gonna catch that from the city, from City of Lawrence, for processing our water. That's gonna continue on and on and on. Are you gonna charge the so much more per thousand per year as opposed to a debt rate?
Yeah, so if you look in the ordinance, there, it does say we will pass on those raw water costs from Lawrence every year. Is that what you're saying? That will go into the new rate. So that will go into what we need to do in 2025.
That'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we're playing catch up now.
Yeah, we didn't do that the last 4
Right.
years.
It bit us.
Even though it was in the works, we just didn't do it. So yes, we will be passing that along. We have to. It's just like the cost of.
It's like the cost of gasoline, huh?
Yeah.
That's gonna get higher too.
So it's been going
Never
on.
know.
Thank you for your time.
Good question.
Any other questions for Glenn? All right, thanks.
Hearing none.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion? We haven't had it already. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we
15-121.
I move to approve the amendments as presented to ordinance number 1484.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Jerry? Susan?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is Rec Commission Management Agreement. Glenn, do you want to present this?
Brief introduction to this. New community center is underway, and we have been negotiating an agreement with the Rec Commission to move their current operations from downtown into that building when it's open. So that's what you have in your packet is a management agreement between the city and the Rec Commission. It's about as simple as we can make it. This is going to be a permanent move for them, so we want to have a good place for them to be. Construction right now is on schedule, and we're looking at the end of May, early June for completion, actually. So we're making great progress over there. But anyway, we've been negotiating here with the Rec Commission. I don't know for how many months. It seems like a long time. And
Only last 30 days.
yeah. Well, when we got down to the nuts and bolts of this, this went a lot quicker. So that's what it is. It's kind of a basic agreement. We're going to pay them a management fee, and then we are going to get a percentage of the actual revenue that's charged fees per service over there, which we have really no idea what that's going to be at that point. So that's why I kind of structured the way it is. There's so many unknowns. It's a brand new building. We're guessing on what the usage will be, but there's a lot of needs in the community. I get calls constantly for people looking for event space or whatever space for this. And we don't have anything like that in our community right now, but we will. So we've assumed a little bit of the risk by doing just a percentage of the fees, and then we're going to pay them a flat fee for managing the facility every year, and then we can, of course, adjust going forward, just like anything else. If both parties agree, we can renegotiate and see where we're at after the first year or two in the building. That should be interesting to watch. So anyway, so right now, that's what you got in front of you. Is anything, any questions about that?
So the rec isn't tied to any amount of time, like a 5-year agreement, or you just do it every year, renegotiate every year?
I think that was the intent. I don't think, yeah, I don't, yeah, it wasn't like we're in a 5 or 7 year agreement or something like that, so they would, yeah, they'd be tied
I
down.
just wanted to kind of keep it open so that you
Yeah.
can see how
Yeah.
the space kind of evolved, so it would be fluid for.
Right,
A lot of unknowns, want to keep it, conversation open.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Make sure everyone's comfortable and it's
Right.
a good thing for everybody.
Yeah, and we're looking, of course, as city to break even on our costs on the building and whatever, and they're looking, of course, to do the same thing. They're gonna have different personnel over there and they'll have different needs, and so it'll be a very different experience for them as well as for us, but it's also something to look forward to here too. I think there's just a lot of need for the space, so we'll see how that progresses. Other than that, that was really the only sort of negotiating point. Otherwise, this is real basic agreement.
Any other questions for Glenn? Thanks, Glenn.
All right.
Anybody else like?
And Matt's here representing the rec commission too, if you have any questions.
I didn't want to leave Matt out of it.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Council discussion?
Here's the only thing did the CDC look at, now that we have a comprehensive list of city will provides, have we bounced that off? Like, the latest pro forma with these numbers are in your packet. Have we bounced off what we need to provide versus what we kind of built in as like maintenance number annually? Has somebody looked at that and said, yeah, that makes sense?
I just talked to Ben real briefly before this meeting to see if everything.
Well, I'm just thinking, are we gonna have to hire an additional person? So to go do all these things, the city staff has to go do it, right? Do we have the people to do it? Is it gonna cost, just wanna make sure that we balance it. And again, it's only 1 year, so we go, man, we completely underestimated this, and here's why. I get that. I just didn't know if we made that assumption up front.
We talked in CDC at our last meeting here recently. One of the things that Matt brought up was, for these events, you're talking about maybe 300-400 people at times, big events, sometimes weddings, receptions, etc. Who cleans that up? And, we talked, I think I brought up the example of being like a VRBO or an Airbnb where that cleanup fee is just included there. You go find a company who comes in and cleans it up. And that's just included and that's passed on to the person renting it. So yeah, there's some stuff like that needs talked through, and I think as far as stuff that's impactful to the pro forma, our maintenance fee, what we have in there annually?
I think we combined like 47K.
50K, yeah, about that, yeah. I mean, obviously that's gonna get more and more expensive as the building ages. I think that's probably pretty conservative now. I don't think you're gonna be spending 50 maintenance in the first few years. I hope
Right.
not.
Yeah.
Certainly hope not. But I see what you're saying. I think there's so many unknowns until,
And I think that there's another level of this that the CDC will have to work with the rec in forming the cost structure for those types of things. And I think that's where a lot of that will come. Because I know that Sullivan Square has taught us that we need to do something on that side as well.
yeah. And Matt will come in here just like he does with the pool next year, and he'll give us a presentation on what they drew in for events and et cetera. And if those numbers need to be calibrated where it makes, more sense. But the whole goal is the city's, we're not trying to make anything on this. We're trying to break even and let them program the heck out of it and let the community enjoy it. And that's really the main goal here. And I think wherever the numbers need to be, we just kind of revisit that annually.
Who's gonna be required to cut insurance on this?
We do. Yeah, just like Sullivan Square, we insure that as well.
I think it's a great start. I think you did a good job getting there. I think it's a huge benefit to having the rec involved for
For
two
sure.
reasons. you know, one is just the quality of what they do. You know, if they I anticipate that's going to continue on, and they're just going to make that a tremendous success along with the pool and Sullivan Square. So that's huge. And then, you know, without them, you know, we're going to have to staff that ourselves, right? So it's a cost sharing. So they're now picking that up. We don't have to do it. So to me, it's a great partnership with a quality organization. I think it's going to be very successful.
Only gonna have to eventually work out weekends or holidays when somebody wants to use it, or are they gonna be responsible for that, or?
Yeah.
That's what everything's gonna be for, through the rec.
It goes into a lot of the unknowns. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, they have their budget, they have to hire a front of the office person that's gonna be a whole new brand new position that they've kind of used another one of their positions to do both. It's already a lot, to share that role, be in the front desk and doing other, roles as well. So a dedicated person who's gonna be there full-time, you know, giving tours, doing all the front of the house stuff as far as the rec, goes. But we also don't know, you know, what that volunteer component's gonna be, you know, after 5 o'clock or after their programming ends, what that open gym looks like. You know, it may end up being that the events are so lucrative, and when this all bounces out, that we can then afford one more staff in there for the PM hours. We need to get in there, we need to open it up and see what, you know, the answers to these unknowns are, and get that first year sample, I think, before we can really, truly, honestly answer any of that. But I'll tell you this, the spirit of the whole thing is to get people in there using it. People of all demographics, everybody in the community using the community center. And so, however that shakes out is however it shakes out, but that's the whole intent here.
So it's still free to the community.
Yes.
Okay.
No membership fee or anything.
Except if somebody wants to rent it out,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what.
Right.
I
Yeah, if you want to rent the
understand
space, yeah.
that. I'm just talking about kids coming in.
Yeah, yeah, there's
Yep.
no entrance fee.
Is there any reason that Baker would ever wanna use it?
Yes, they've already reached out.
What?
They talked to me about their alumni events. They might want to run it for that.
Yeah.
They said a little bit about their wrestling practices, or different type of practices that they want to use it for. So that's something I'll have to talk to the rec about. See how that can fit in. But ultimately, I think I've said this to Matt, said it CDC, I mean, the goal was to service the kids after school and to get somewhere for our seniors to be able to go walk during the winters.
Is there gonna be a kitchen there? Not gonna be a kitchen.
So catering kitchen.
Yeah, warm kitchen. You can't actually prepare like a meal with a stove and the hood vent and all that, but you bring in previously prepared meals, you can heat them up and keep things
You
warm.
need a crock pot, is that what you're saying?
Well, you get warming cabinets, stuff that you don't need ventilation for, the real expensive stuff.
Just get the crock pot set, lock it, the lid's locked.
That's right.
Any other discussion or? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the management agreement between the city and the rec commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Julia. All right, next is the appointments. Treasurer, judge, attorney, police chief, fire chief, and city clerk. I'm proposing and recommending to the council that all appointments remain as they are. Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? I swayed a little bit on our police chief and fire chief from some of the comments that they make to me, but I refrained from using my personal bias and instead went for what I believe is probably potentially best for the community.
Well, we'll see. It remains to be seen.
One Doc?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that's over.
Well, we haven't voted yet.
Tuck yourself right in.
Well, it's okay though. The reason I wanted to come up, we've had some changes at the fire department. Tim, stand up. Tim Silvers, as of January 1, has taken over the assistant chief's position. He is now my new assistant chief. Becky couldn't be here tonight, but Connor finished his EMT in December. He's now certified state EMT and national EMT. Becky finished her advanced EMT in December. So they both finished their courses in December. And we also, me and Tim decided to promote Becky to lieutenant over medical. She works with Lawrence directly. I don't know if you guys got the letter in your packet from Chief Joels. He wrote that about a month ago or so at a Chiefs meeting. He just wanted to let you guys know. I mean, I can sit up here and say whatever all day long, but our working with them is just, God, we've so advanced with them. And but I just wanted to introduce you to Tim in case he has to take my place here. He just didn't walk in and you don't know who he is. And I'm really proud of Connor. He works a full-time job and got his EMT. And Becky is a single mom who works in the ER 13, 16-hour shifts, and she got her advanced EMT. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? No? Discussion?
Recommendation. Survey kind of points out that we're doing something right.
Yep.
Right. Hate to change anything, right?
Oh, entertain a motion.
I move to approve all appointments as presented.
Second. Beecham.
Been moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next agenda item is city depositories. Glenn or Ben, whoever.
Yeah, I'll do it real quick, yeah. Just by state law, you have to designate a depository, your local bank, where you're gonna stash your cash, basically, every year. So we've been using Baldwin State Bank, and that is our recommendation, once again, to do that. So that's all this is, very pro forma.
Did we not, I thought we dedicated it to all three so we can bid out money.
I think as far as, this is a little different than what I'm thinking about, actually. Yes, you're right. So if we do have a bond or, or a loan or whatever, yeah, you can do, so you can actually designate all three as your city depositories rather than depository. So, it's correct. All right, very good. That's all it is.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion?
Keep the same. I like when we get all the bids.
I'll entertain a motion. Do we need to list out all banks in that motion?
Yeah, I would.
I move that we approve Baldwin State Bank, Mid-America Bank, Kansas State Bank as the city depositories.
Moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item, resolution for sale of bonds.
This resolution will actually take out the temporary notes. This will be permanent financing for the community center. What's structured in this resolution is what's called a parameters resolution. It gives the mayor the authority to execute documents on the day of the sale. There's 2.625 million as a maximum, with a 4.5% interest rate would be a maximum percent we could go under this parameters resolution. Then it would come, the sale documents would come back to you guys, the second meeting in February for ratification, and it'd be done. We had originally forecasted 5.5% for that forecast, the community center forecast. Right now it's around 3.5%, and we think that's 25 basis points too high. So the interest rates, as they go low, by the time we hit February, middle of February, they, knock on wood, they could be a lot lower than what we had expected. And that could right there make up for a lot of money that was in that forecast. So this is actually, you couldn't have had more perfect timing on this issue, just because from a rate structure standpoint. But that's really all this is.
Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Council discussion?
How glad we waited.
Great call, Corey.
It's working out.
All you had to do was walk down the aisle at Home Depot and get scared. Construction and bond.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the offering for sale of general obligation bond series 2024A by the city of Baldwin City, Kansas, and amending resolution number 2021-2.
Second.
We move to second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Name.
Motion passes 4-1. Next is the annual council president election.
I nominate Scott to stay as president.
I second that.
Third, it's been moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Man, you didn't even let him finish.
I was, exactly what I was gonna do.
I know.
Motion passes.
I abstain.
Council committee reports, budget and finance, Scott.
Yeah, we had a budget finance committee meeting. I think the bulk of it was on the water rate. Formulating that plan, we saw, we passed on the ordinance. Let's figure out what. What else did we, that was the bulk of it. We talked about the reformatting.
Tonight.
Yeah, we covered it all, I think, all tonight. The next meeting, is this Friday, 7:30 a.m. Second floor City Hall. What we want to do is on the agenda, so you're aware, hammer about it, is we want to go and just make sure that we have all these rates locked in for 2024. So these changes we made, we want to have the Budget Finance Committee help city confirm that that's what it is. And it hadn't changed. We just lock those in. So it's going to be a review of those and kind of locking that in what we decided tonight. And then some other items. So we'll cover that in there when she shows up. So, that's it.
Community development, Corey.
We moved our January meeting up to the 8th. This one that we had here in the past, so we could meet and talk about what we just approved here with the rec, with the community center and that lease, or not lease agreement, managing agreement. And so that was our January meeting. The next one, I guess, would be February.
Did BG not go for the work? Did you guys not discuss the work streams? I thought they were supposed to be this week.
It was all this one. As I understood, we were waiting on BG.
Yeah, we still are, yeah.
So, okay, we pushed the December meeting to January 8th. So maybe we just have 2 meetings in January if we need to get BG in there. I'm fine with that if you want.
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
fine by me.
yeah, they're both urgent matters. That's why we
Right.
pushed it.
Yeah.
So we could meet them. Do we need to reach out to Jason and see?
I'll do it. I need a couple of things for him anyway, so
Okay.
I'll add that to the stack.
So pending a January meeting, I'm going to tentatively say, watch the schedule, but Monday the 22nd, 4 o'clock, second floor of the City Hall.
Public safety, Susan.
We do not meet this month. Our next meeting is February 13th at 4 o'clock.
Public works and utilities, Julie.
Yeah, we didn't meet at our usual time because I was out of town, so we're gonna meet this Thursday, 9 a.m. And I would, so I didn't have any notes to present, but I just wanted to thank the Public Works guys for being out taking care of the storm. They're gonna be out picking up limbs if it ever stops snowing. But I think they do a great job. I just think they need to have credit for all the work they do.
Agree.
What you say, 13th February?
Strategic planning, Scott?
Yeah, we had a meeting, a small meeting. It was really just Ryan. You saw the stack of information he had on that survey. I think it was 150 pages, all the data. And we walked through what he was going to present to try to get it into the time frame that he had. So really just kind of reviewing that. You all saw that. I think we're going to put the survey results information online. We're going to figure out how we're going to best do that. We'll have to work with Glenn and make that happen. But it was spent just preparing for this meeting. Next one, how's February 2nd look for you, for any? So that, we'll do February 2nd, 2 p.m., second floor City Hall, and hope, that'll give you time to work with Lynn and Ryan and Jeff and figure out if we can't get something on the electrical liability, something that we can get on the website as part of the strategic plan baseline, and then also Ryan and ETC to figure out how we can parse that information and put it in as backing data for our strategic plan, performance indicators. So give us a week or so, 2 weeks to get that and come to the meeting and then kind of put it together. So
That works.
Hey, you guys, I know we talked about it in committee a little bit, but came up with what's going on the website based off of this survey, or are we doing the whole survey?
we're trying to figure that out. I think that's the committee to figure out what makes sense. I mean, obviously, this presentation as a minimum should go out there, like we presented it, let's put it out there. The question is there more? You just throw that gigantic document out there. But I think, that's obviously a council decision, so feedback would be great.
My personal opinion is, yes, I think tonight's,
Yeah.
we need to get that out there.
Yeah.
ASAP. But I also am okay putting a full report out there so people can sift through it as much or as little as they want.
Yeah.
This isn't paid for, so.
Right.
And I think part of what we're going to be formulating as part of the committee responsibility, I think we need to start zeroing in on the next strategic planning council workshop. And timing of that, March or whenever that makes sense, to get preparation for budget planning and take results and talk about, do we want to change any of the strategic plan? How do we want to use this information we just had as we go into budget season, and where's the council priority? And then maybe give that guidance back out to the department heads as they're putting their budget together, be thinking about how they would impact, at least the guidance to the council. Hey, we'd like to see if we can improve in these areas, wide open for their ideas.
So I think we definitely can, no later than March, or
Right.
April's when we start meeting with the department.
Okay, I mean, could early as late February or.
I'll leave it to you guys, if you guys are ready. But definitely, probably the third Tuesday or second Tuesday in February, would probably be too soon, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have all the data. How much can we get it to a form we can all make sense out of? That's the hard part. We can spend hours in that meeting trying to figure that out. If we get Ryan and ETC to help us, at least say, well, here's what the data says about each one of these priorities. And say, okay, here's what they're saying. And then based on the importance, right? It's two things. How you're doing and how important is it? Those are the two things that kind of came out of that.
I figured there'd be a lot of overlap with ETC as far, do they offer strategic planning guides to municipalities or? Kind of the way Patty did, but
I think they're just a survey.
it needs to be separate, right? This is the data you guys, yeah, we don't want to mess with that.
Well, yeah.
You interpret it, right?
Yeah, I mean, because we did force in those questions you talked about. It's like, well, here's what we want this survey to do. We want to understand if our strategic plan is what the citizens still want, because it's been a while since we talked to them. And then how are we doing in each of those areas? So we did put those in there. They weren't in there originally. They just had their standard format of things that are important to cities. So I think that was important, and we got great data out of it, that we are aligned.
I don't think it's like when we first brought in Patty, who were just kind of sitting in this room, like, we have a lot more of a foundation to throw this data at, and
It was a lot of those meetings. We got a little bit better each time.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd start just weeding things out. I mean, that wasn't lost effort.
No.
I mean, we got to what we got to, you know, and now it's been kind of just validated.
Right.
And the question is, do we change it? Things will come up. Does it make sense? What can we do? And some of the stuff was like, we don't have enough information on what the survey said. We didn't ask the question correctly.
Right.
Do we want to go resurvey? Talk about that. You can actually go back out and say specifically around a specific area. So we're going to talk, okay, here's what we got. What did you mean? And have people give feedback. Again, it goes back to the growth thing.
Right.
I'm not happy with the way the city's managing growth. Okay, now you don't know. Too fast, too
Yeah.
slow. So we have, he suggested that if those are areas we want to go look at, we can go to resurvey on a very smaller set of questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of work to do. I mean, I don't think we officially landed on a vision statement or a mission statement.
Well, so that'd be the thing. First thing you get in is, are we still comfortable with this?
Yeah.
Right, so it's never done.
Right.
It'll always be changing, but yeah, those things we're going to tweak, and so we need to set up the agenda for that meeting workshop and say, here's what we want to do. Come in and see if we can get it done in an hour.
I think if we're going to do it, the second meeting in February is probably best because we're pushing into spring break time for everybody.
If we have a deadline, it'll kind of force us to.
I mean, you could do the last, so if you guys wanted to wait longer, we could do it the last Tuesday of March. I think, I prefer to do it in February though, so we're out ahead
Yeah,
of
too.
the
We certainly do something then.
We'll be thawed out by March.
So
Let's do it when it's cold.
Talking about Tuesday, I'd like, what,
That's when the ice storm.
We can do,
20th?
the 13th, or, yeah, the 13th. Which is my 40th. Or the 27th.
Don't take all the time I can get.
So you want to do the 27th of February?
I should do it on the 13th, so it's your birthday. It'd be a nice 40th birthday.
Great, 40th.
What better way to spend it?
Happy to.
I don't know, we won't be ready. The late February is good.
So we want to set a work session for the 27th of February, 7 o'clock at the police department. All right, that's it. You good, Scott?
Yep.
City administrator, any more comments?
Just a couple, yeah. Our street crews did a fantastic job as they always do. They got out ahead of the storm, stayed on top of it the whole time, no matter what came at us, wind, cold, snow, ice, whatever, they stayed on top of that, as they always do. On the electric side, we didn't have any outages. We had a couple of blips, mainly there were a couple of trees that fell on a line a couple of blocks away from here, so we identified that, got off. They were arcing and sparking down there, so our guys got that off there. As far as I know, we didn't lose any customers during the real cold spell here. The wind's a big problem, knocking down trees and playing havoc on the lines. We've been running our power plant on a daily basis. We've been dispatched by the Southwest Power Pool because when it's really cold and the wind dies down, there's not that much power out there, so they do call on us to run. So every day at 10 o'clock, we have a conference call with them, and they tell us what the schedule is going to be, and then it'll probably continue through this coming weekend when it's going to get cold again. Unfortunately, the forecast is for getting cold again. So thousands of people around us were out of power here in the past week or so for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of it had to do with the high winds that came through with that snow. As far as I know, so we didn't lose anybody. We just had a couple of blips because of some coming to trees, a little voltage ups and downs because the whole system was pretty wonky for a while. But we're running almost every day right now because they're calling us to do that, which are, that's part of the deal. We enter our power plant in the market, and they can call on us to do that. So we're kind of easing the load out there for other people right now. So doing a lot of good things all the way around as far as the electric, public works, of course, everything else going pretty good. So anyway.
Who sets those rates when we're generating for the?
Yeah, that's part of a contract that we have with them. So once we enter into the market and KMEA is controlling that, we do get paid for that. So I think we're like $120 an hour, so $150, I forget the exact amount is. So we don't make a lot of money on it because we don't run that much. Yeah, but yeah, we don't lose money when that happens. Yeah, so we're stabilizing the grid, but we're also making a little bit of money.
But our ability to stabilize the grid is our capacity, correct? That's what we
Yes,
offer the-
absolutely, yeah.
Going back to that,
Yeah,
there's two values. You gate. You get the money.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Plus the-
Right, plus you're helping your neighbors out, and, yeah, so they love that. So right now, gas prices aren't too high, and diesel's actually pretty low for us. We buy that in bulk, so we can run when we're called on it. So I think they started running like midnight on Saturday and ran through 12 o'clock on Sunday, and then like every day where there's another call for more power. So yeah, it works out a number of different ways for us. So it's not just emergency service in here. We can help the neighbors out when they need it also. So there's a lot of benefits to having your own power. So anyway, so far so good here this winter. Yay. So I hope we'll keep that going. So anyway,
Awesome.
all right.
What got a water leak at the parking lot?
I know we had a couple of water leaks. I think I know the one you're talking
Right
about.
there by the shop, right there by the office.
Right.
Everywhere.
Yeah, water leak.
Yeah, that's not a water leak. That's just the way it drains
It's
there.
tall enough to make that much water.
It just, when we got the,
But in the winter, groundwater moves.
yeah, it'll do that almost. I guess you never noticed that before.
Oh,
You're not riding your scooter out there, are you, or anything like that?
no, but
All
I
right.
started to.
Okay, all right. You can play hockey out there, but yeah, it's,
I got snow, I got it's chains and
Right.
snow tires.
okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, let us know when you can do that, so.
We want pictures.
Yeah, right. Can we get you a shovel on the front? You can go down the sidewalk
I
or
think
something?
my almost broke his helmet playing football. You wait till you see mine.
Yeah, okay, all right. Wow, okay, anyway, just wanted to make people aware that all that's going on out there.
The only statement I wanted to make, I sent Glenn an email about this earlier, looking at our trash agreement. So there's some talk on social media. Just so everybody's clear, we went out multiple times for bids, multiple. We didn't take the only bid. The council decided to rebid it out and then we got a second bid that was quite a bit higher than the bid we accepted. But one thing I did notice on that, which is different than our agreement, is second trash bin's only $5 versus the $8. So
Okay.
we listed on our,
All right, yeah, I couldn't remember that.
yeah, so it's only $5.
It's $5 for
So
an
we
extra
can
bid.
probably get that correct.
Does that start in February?
Yes.
Okay.
When are they delivering trash cans? They never said
They
that.
were all at the Home Depot.
You're gonna pick them up.
No.
No, they're, yeah, if you,
I wanted to.
yeah.
Oh, no, that looked weird.
No, yeah, drag them back.
Dragging them back.
Yeah, they're storing them in their parking out there by the train depot right now. Those are the trash, and then once they've distributed those, then they're gonna bring in the recycle ones. They'll have a different color. I think they'll have a yellow lid on. That'll be the only difference.
So those are the trash.
Those are the trash ones. Yeah, those are
I
trash.
didn't imagine that's what those look like. I pictured the carts, the ones that actually have the
That's what it is.
no.
No, they're big bins, and so, yeah, and they're all gonna be automated from now on. So, yeah, so their plan is to get those out in January.
Metal.
The ones you can push, they got little bigger tires on them.
Oh.
They're little bigger capacities. What I
Oh,
imagined,
no,
maybe that was just my imagination when they said the gallonage. I just
Right.
assumed it was a big one. I don't know.
yeah, okay.
I was hoping it was the big one.
That's, yeah,
So.
That's what you need.
On the 29th?
yeah, it's the end of this
They'll
month.
Probably dropping them off before the next
You
week
want to
while they're,
start this week.
while they're picking up.
Yeah.
Or next week.
Yeah,
So probably have 2 trucks going.
yep. So, yep, that'll be starting in this month. So that's what all those are down there. Have not seen the recycle bins yet, but they'll get them in next. So they're moving forward.
Other than that, Jerry, you're gonna be disappointed. I'm keeping all the council committees the same.
What?
I spoke to every council member. They were happy.
Whoa. I agree.
You offered to give up your seat for Jerry. So I'm just gonna keep it the same.
That ain't fair.
Sorry.
You ought to be able to move around. I mean, 3 or 4 year period, you ought to be able to cover at least 4 of them.
Well, we'll talk about it on your third year.
Huh?
We'll talk about the third year. Said 3 or 4. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So now you guys like me, is that it?
Aye.
All opposed, nay?
Huh?
Maybe it means that they do like it.